Hello. I was just looking at that house behind me. It's got historical significance. In England in the 1840s, a man by the name of John Ned Kelly was arrested and sent to Australia for the horrible crime of stealing 2 pigs. Once he served his 7 years, he came to Melbourne and he met a woman by the name of Ellen, and they got married and they lived in this house here 46 kilometres north of Melbourne in Beveridge. Now they had 7 kids, and one of those kids, his name was Edward, but no one called him Edward. His name was Ned Kelly. Now I have to admit, I don't know a lot about Ned Kelly. I know who he is. I know that he was a bushranger, outlaw. There was a shootout in Glenrowan. They've made some movies about him, which I haven't really seen. But I thought, what better way to dig into the real story of Ned Kelly than to go to all the locations where he lived, where he robbed banks, where he shot people, and get to know who was Ned Kelly. Villain? Hero? I don't know. But I'm going to go on this journey, this location tour of Ned Kelly, and it begins here in Beveridge. Let's check out this house. The eastern section of this house is the boyhood home of Edward Ned Kelly, the Kelly family house. Wow, veranda door. It's kind of a tiny little house. I think people were shorter in the old days. I've heard this. Just another view of some side door there. And this is an area that backyard and side yard. Ned Kelly would have been playing here as a little boy. They sold the property in 1864 for £80 and moved to Avenel. Due to the crushing land prices in Beveridge, the Kellys had to sell up and move further north to Avenel. They rented this property here on Hovell Street. And there is a sign here, the Kelly Farm, the Avenel Days. The Kellys rented a 40-acre farm here from 1864 to 1867. They paid £14 per year to the owner, Elizabeth Mutton. The Kellys ran the farm for dairying and sold milk and butter in the local community. It was a hard struggle to make ends meet, and drought compounded their problems. This led Red to steal a calf from a neighbouring property owned by the Morgans, which led to him going to jail for 6 months hard labour at Kilmore. And there are cows watching me, and a dog who was barking before but has stopped. It's okay, calm down. The Kellys did pretty well here in Avenel. They were well liked, mainly due to the fact that Ned actually saved the life of a young boy who fell into Hughes Creek just behind me and nearly drowned. And to thank Ned for that, they gave him a green scarf. Remember that for later. Approximately 150 metres downstream is the site where Ned rescued Richard Shelton. Richard accidentally fell from a makeshift footbridge into the high-flowing Hughes Creek on his way to school. See, Ned was a hero, at least on that day. Okay, just next to the bridge is a little track here. I'm guessing Ned saved Richard's life somewhere around here. And we're under the modern bridge. This wouldn't have been here. In the old days, but there you are. In 1865, John Red Kelly spent 6 months hard labour in Kilmore Jail because he couldn't afford the £25 fine. The old Kilmore Jail is still standing and has been turned into a cafe. So John passed away not long after he was released from prison from the effects of excessive alcohol. And then he was buried in the Avenel Cemetery. So we're going to have a look at that. John Red Kelly, his grave. Hopefully the rain stops. I am currently in the Avenel Cemetery. And in this cemetery lies John Red Kelly.
I've been told, we've been here 20 years, I've been told by the war locals, the older guys, that's not where Red Kelly's grave is.
It's not?
The road. The cemetery used to be there, make of it what you will. It'll either ruin a story or make a story. There's a few things that they say about Ned Kelly that they're not better, they're not worse, they're just different.
He's probably not there, he might be under the road.
Well, that's where the cemetery was, that's a fact, but you know, it extended right out, so the road's new, and then some of them say, yeah, and that's where his grave was.
And I've just been told by a local who just walked past that John Kelly might not even be here. John Kelly might be under the road there because the cemetery originally extended out there. And so that's what they say here in Avenel, that John Kelly might not be here. Under the road, which, interesting. Are you there, John? 1 year after John passed away, Ellen moved the family to Greta to live with her sisters. They stayed there till 1868, when Ned's uncle Jim burnt down the house. Where's the luck, Ned? He got 15 years hard labour for that. And now I'm going to drive to Beechworth, because that's where I'm staying, and pick this up tomorrow. Enough with the banjos. I'm on Kelly Gap Road, and the old Kelly family homestead should be around here somewhere. Hopefully there's a sign. It's a very bumpy dirt road. I wasn't able to check Google Earth prior to coming because there was no street view. So I don't really know if I'll find it. Now, after Ned's uncle burnt their house down, Ellen's sister's house, Ellen moved her 7 children here to this property, 70 acres. And here they lived. Ned was pretty much the man of the house at 13 or 14 years old. And they lived here. The Land Selection Act required that whoever lived on it had to clear and cultivate the land. So living here was Ellen and her 7 children, and we're talking about 70 acres. That would have been a lot of work. Ellen would turn this house into a boarding house to make ends meet. Now, something that has happened here that's quite disturbing is that there is a sign here that says private property, of course, no trespassing, fair enough. But here, please respect the fact that this is private property. Due to people that have trespassed before you, this site has been destroyed slab by slab, brick by brick. If you appreciate the history of Ned Kelly, don't vandalise it any further by trespassing. If you know anyone who claims to have something from the Kelly homestead, realise that 99% of those people have stolen it and destroyed what you could be looking at now. Most of the stolen items have nothing to do with Ellen Kelly and her family, but belongings to the families that lived in the renovated homestead up until the 1950s. So people have gone onto this property and removed part of the homestead, and now I don't think we can't see any homestead at all. It's completely gone. I'm in shock. I'm really in shock about people stealing parts of the Kelly homestead. Well, Anyway, back to the story of Ned Kelly. Now this is the old courthouse here in Benalla. There's a little, of course, another sign. At the age of 14, Ned Kelly stood trial here, charged with highway robbery against R. Fook, a pig and poultry hawker from near Bright. Ned faced the court after being held in jail for 11 days. And then the charge was dismissed. And there's a lot of information there. So Ned Kelly was held in this place for 11 days. And there's a sign. What's this say? Ned Kelly, Kelly's cell. Let's see. So for 11 days, Ned Kelly was held here. Kelly's cell. Right. Gee. Oh. Locked. Over the next 9 years, Ned would find himself in and out of jail for horse stealing, riding while drunk, resisting arrest, and assaulting police officers. Ned spent a total of 2 years at the Beechworth jail, which is still there as a tourist attraction. It's on the corner of William Street and Ford Street in Beechworth. On the 15th of April 1878, a visit from a police officer at the Kelly farm would lead to Ned Kelly becoming the outlaw bushranger we know today. Constable Fitzpatrick was heading to this house that was there to arrest Dan Kelly for horse stealing. According to Fitzpatrick, Dan wasn't there when he got there, but he stayed and talked to Ellen for about an hour. Eventually, Dan showed up with his brother-in-law Bill, and Fitzpatrick arrested Dan. Dan wanted to eat something before he was taken away because he was hungry. The constable allowed that, and a short time later, Ned Kelly burst through the door firing a shot at Fitzpatrick. With the help of Bill, who drew his revolver, and Bricky Williamson, who was the next-door neighbour, drew his, Ellen hit the constable over the head with a fire shovel. There was a struggle and a couple more shots were fired. Ned and Dan were able to disarm Fitzpatrick. Kelly told the constable that he didn't know he was a police officer. They got the bullet out of Fitzpatrick's arm, dressed the wound. Ellen said to him if he told anybody what happened, his life would not be worth living. Fitzpatrick left and reported what happened anyway. Now, the Kelly's version of events is a bit different. Apparently Fitzpatrick was drunk. He was sexually harassing Ned's sister Kate, and Ned wasn't even there.
Jesus, Ned, they've arrested Ma.
Hey, what?
Yeah, they've taken her to the cells. Charged you with attempted murder.
Attempted murder?
And Fitzpatrick saying you took a shot at him.
I wasn't even there.
We know that, but it's your word against his.
Constable Fitzpatrick's testimony led to Ellen, Bill Skillion and Bricky Williamson's arrests for aiding and abetting attempted murder. Their court appearance was at the Beechworth courthouse. Bill and Bricky got 6 years hard labour and Ellen 3 years. Ned and Dan were on the run and Joe Byrne and Steve Hart would eventually join them. On the 25th of October 1878, the Kelly gang were at Bullock Creek in the Wombat Ranges. I drove 11 kilometres on a sloppy dirt road to get to that location, where the Kelly gang famously ambushed police officers who were hunting them. Well, I seriously probably need to be committed for what I'm doing here. I've made my way to Stringybark Creek, where the Kelly gang, or Ned Kelly, shot the police officers. Now, there's a memorial here to the police officers. Constable Scanlon, Lonergan and Sergeant Kennedy. So basically what happened at Stringybark, the police were trying to find the Kelly gang and they weren't really that far from the Kelly gang's hideout. So you had Sergeant Kennedy and Constable Scanlon went out looking around, and Constable McIntyre and Lonigan remained at the camp. Now the Kelly gang show up. Ned shoots Lonigan, Constable Thomas Lonigan, because Lonigan made a motion to draw his revolver and ran for cover a few yards away. Ned immediately shot him, killing him. And so then they questioned McIntyre, and then they waited for Kennedy and Scanlon to return. A bit later, Kennedy and Scanlon returned. The Kelly gang hid themselves, according to McIntyre. McIntyre walked towards Kennedy, but before he could say anything to him, the Kelly gang ordered the police to bail up. Kennedy tried to unclip his gun holster and shots were fired by the gang. McIntyre begged Kennedy to surrender as he was surrounded. Scanlon dismounted and was shot before he even had a chance to shoot himself. According to Ned, Scanlon fired and Ned shot him as he tried to fire again. Scanlon died soon after. Kennedy had dismounted and, according to McIntyre, tried to surrender without firing a shot. But the gang continued firing at him. According to Kelly, Kennedy hid behind a tree and started firing. Kennedy retreated into the bush. Ned and Dan pursued him for almost a mile, exchanging gunfire with the sergeant before Ned shot him in the right side. According to Ned, Kennedy then turned around to face him, and Ned shot him in the chest with his shotgun, not realising that Kennedy had dropped his revolver and was turning to surrender. Sergeant Michael Kennedy. That was it. There was no going back after that. The Kelly gang were on the run, wanted for murder, multiple murder of police officers. Now I have to admit something. I was a bit scared on my way down, or up here, or down here, to Stringybark Creek. It's a dirt road, and it has been raining quite a bit this morning. So I've waited for the rain to stop and I've made my way here, but with the fog and the wet road, the muddy road, fear of getting bogged and all that sort of thing, I couldn't help but think to myself, why am I doing this? What is wrong with me? I must be out of my mind. But I'm here, and I'm so glad that I'm here. And just looking up the fog.
News of the police killings led to a widespread fear of the Kelly gang, and a reward for their capture was put forward. On Sunday the 8th of December 1878, the Kelly gang would ride into Euroa, with the intention of robbing the local bank and creating mayhem the gang would become famous for.
So the infamous robbery of the Euroa National Bank by the Kelly gang in December 1878 was the result of a carefully staged plan designed to draw the attention of both politicians and the public alike to the perceived injustices surrounding the Stringybark Creek incident.
But I am a widow's son, outlawed. My orders must be obeyed.
Incident. This was the bank that the Kellys robbed. It's now an accounting firm. December 10th, 1878 saw a daring raid by the Kelly gang on the second Euroa National Bank, built at this site in 1876. Ned, Dan and Steve held the bank. Joe stayed at Faithful's Creek Station, 3.5 miles away, guarding captives taken the previous night. The present building was built in 1974 using the original bricks.
The 14 members of the bank manager's household staff were taken to Faithful's Creek, where Ned dictated a letter to a Victorian parliamentarian, Donald Cameron, complaining of police corruption and harassment. Apparently much of the money taken was given to family and people who gave the gang assistance. The Kelly gang had their sympathisers. 23 of them were put in jail without trial, including John Quinn, John Stewart and Joseph Ryan. The gang was starting to run out of money, and they would find it across the New South Wales border. The New South Wales police had no idea the Kelly gang were about to strike.
Well, I've crossed the border into New South Wales and just 10 minutes away from Jerilderie. And they've got a sign here, home of Ned Kelly's Jerilderie letter. That's a letter that Ned wanted to deliver to Jerilderie in Jerilderie. Okay, can you see that? What happened was, towards midnight on Saturday the 8th of February 1879, the Kelly gang converged on the police barracks. Ned Kelly waited on horseback at the fence approximately 50 metres in front of the barracks, while Joe Byrne, Steve Hart and Dan Kelly crept up to the barracks. With Joe Byrne taking up position on the eastern end, Steve Hart and Dan Kelly were on the western end. When in position, Ned rode up to the barracks calling out for Senior Constable Devine. On hearing his name, Devine called out, "I'm in bed, what do you want?" While still on horseback, Ned replied, "For God's sake, get up. There's a row on at Davidson's and they're fighting. If they're not stopped, there'll be murder before morning." Devine sprang out of bed, donned his trousers and socks and stepped out onto the veranda. Trooper Richards had also heard the exchange and stepped out onto the veranda from the office door. When both Devine and Richards were on the veranda in front of him, Ned Kelly drew his revolver and said, "Throw up your hands, I'm Ned Kelly." And as the other three outlaws stepped onto the veranda, "Don't move, for you are also covered by my men from both sides of the veranda, and on the slightest movement on the part of either of you, you'll be shot by them."
Devine and his family were held hostage while the gang dressed as police officers explored the town, making their plans to hold up the Royal Mail Hotel and the National Bank, where they would steal over £2,000. You would think the people of Jerilderie would think something wasn't right.
This is the blacksmith shop. On Monday morning in police uniforms, Joe and Dan brought their horses here to the blacksmith shop owned by Samuel Ray and had them reshod. The blacksmith, Andrew Nixon, was a little suspicious, but nothing came of this. Yes, they would not have been conventional police officers. Good old Joe and Dan. So this is the site of the bank that the Kellys robbed. It looks like a different building. There's a picture of it here. It was the Bank of New South Wales. Joe, pretending to be drunk, gained entry to the back door into the banking chamber and bailed up with the bank's accountant, Edward Living, pronounced Living.
What are all these? Oh, just bank papers, some mortgages. You wouldn't be interested.
What kind of mortgages?
Oh, land, you know. The larger landowners find it a sound economic proposition to annex the smaller properties.
Do they indeed?
And it's a bistro, Kelly's Bistro. There you go. Imagine you rob a bank and like over 100 years later, that bank gets turned into a bistro and it's named after you. Just imagine that for a moment.
Joe Byrne then held up the post office, destroying the telegraph poles and wires in order to cut Jerilderie off from the rest of the world. Ned tried to find the local newspaper owner to print his letter, which defended his past actions, but the newspaper owner had already fled the town. It's incredible how much of this story, all the locations have remained. Some thingamajigs in there? Oh, here they are. Insurance. The 6 Aboriginal trackers were withdrawn on the 25th of June 1880, but then re-engaged after the former associate of the Kelly gang turned police informant, Aaron Sherritt, was shot and killed by Joe Byrne. The police would finally catch up with the Kelly gang in Glenrowan, a town which has great affection for Ned Kelly. Even though you've got your statue over there of Ned Kelly, opposite is a guy taking his photo. Everywhere from the bakery, souvenir shop, and of course, Kellyland, where you can watch a reenactment of Ned Kelly's last stand and the events that led up to it. With animatronics and special effects, you are magically transported back to June 28, 1880, where the police, despite attempts to destroy the train track, arrive at the Glenrowan Inn to engage the Kelly gang. Well, I don't really need to explain it, you can just watch this.
You are now standing on the railway station, witnessing the scene as 500 other people did when the ironclad Kelly gang burst through the swirling mist to take on the trainload of heavily armed police. Ned's first shot hit Superintendent Hare in the wrist.
Now, the actual siege actually happened here, on Siege Street here in Glenrowan.
Who goes there? Police! Constable Bracken! Mr. Hare, the Kellys are in the hotel.
Come on, lads. Let's have them.
Well, it wasn't called Siege Street back in 1880, but the Glenrowan Inn was somewhere over there, and the sign is gone. There was a sign here. I've seen photographs of it. It doesn't seem to be here anymore, so I don't know what's happened. And there's a bathtub there. Oh, that's nice. What happened to the sign? So you got 2 members of the Kelly gang, like wooden posts, probably Ned and Dan, and the police are over here. This is where they were during the siege. So this is a closer look at the property that the Glenrowan Inn was on. Anne Jones. I can't see that sign anywhere, just in case it blew off or something. It's definitely not here. The grass is really wet. So there's nothing really here. Okay, it was a hot work shooting at the police. Joe Byrne stopped to grab a drink at the bar but was shot in the groin and fatally wounded.
Here's to many more days in the bush for the Kelly gang!
Three hostages were caught in the crossfire and died: George Metcalf, Martin Cherry, and sweet young Jack Jones. So if we just go across the road, it's getting a bit worn. Wow. This is kind of funny. I think they might need to redo that.
and there's some serious work going on with the bridge. There, Glenrowan Inn. What happened to the sign? The sign?
No sign.
What happened to it?
Don't know.
There used to be a sign there.
Was it?
Anne Jones Inn.
No, yeah, I don't know.
It's gone. He doesn't know. I'm just going to make my way down here. There seems to be more and more. Stay low and aim straight. Had they been without their armour and could take proper aim at us, not one of us could have escaped being shot.
Halt! Throw up your hands!
It's women and children!
It's a woman! Fire it again, I'll bullet through you.
The Kelly gang positioned themselves on the front veranda, opening fire on the police who were about 30 yards away. Dan, Joe and Steve were all fatally wounded while Ned escaped the hotel, heavily bleeding, and hid in the bushes about 100 yards from the hotel.
So I'm just further up Siege Street, and over there is where the Glenrowan Inn was, just behind those trees. And Ned Kelly woke up the next morning and he was over there. And he got up and he started firing at the police. And that was his last stand. Apparently it went on for about half an hour. The figure stopped, raising one foot onto a log and aiming and firing. Shot after shot was fired at it, but without effect. So that's Ned, and he was over there, firing at the police. And I can see a plaque here. Of course there's a plaque. Early on the cold winter morning of Monday, June 28, 1880, the seriously wounded Edward Kelly finally fell at this place and was captured, brought down by Sergeant Steele's double-barreled shotgun. 5 from across the nearby creek.
The police set fire to the Glenrowan Inn, which contained a severely wounded civilian. Their reasoning for this was to flush out the gang. Dan and Steve's body were burnt beyond recognition. Joe's body was later propped up against the door of the Benalla police station for a photograph. When the police captured Ned Kelly, they noticed he was wearing a green scarf. Was it the same scarf given to him by the Sheltons? Was it a reminder to him that he could be a hero? Ned Kelly arrived in Melbourne on the 30th of June 1880. He spent some time in the old Melbourne Jail Hospital, treated for his bullet wounds. Ned was able to meet with his mother Ellen, who was also doing time in the old Melbourne Jail. The area that Kelly's cell was in was demolished and is now an outdoor seated area for visitors. But one part of the jail remains, and it's a pretty interesting tourist attraction.
So Ned Kelly lived to stand trial on the 19th of October 1880 in Melbourne before Sir Redmond Barry, the judge who had early sentenced his mother Ellen to 3 years in prison for the attempted murder of Constable Fitzpatrick. And here we are at the old Melbourne Jail, where Ned spent his final days inside these walls. Okay, I've just noticed this plaque here. The northwest corner was originally the jail laundry. Mrs. Ellen Kelly did the jail washing in this laundry as hard labour while an inmate of the Melbourne jail. She was a prisoner when her son Ned Kelly was hanged inside the jail. Note the brick bases of the two wood-fired coppers in the laundry.
This is the cell that Ned Kelly spent the night in, the night before his execution. Yeah. And there's no plaque, there's no details about it, strangely. But this is where he slept. So after death, the body is wheeled across the hospital yard to the dead house. Some form of post-mortem examination is performed. A death mask is made. So the skull that they had of Ned Kelly, they believed it was Ned Kelly's skull here. It was stolen in 1978. But then it was handed in. In the year 2000. The analysis was able to prove that the skull stolen from the old Melbourne jail in 1978 is not Ned Kelly's skull. The identity of the skull is yet to be confirmed. Okay, so Ned Kelly was buried on these grounds of the old Melbourne jail, and in 1929 they were building RMIT University, and they dug up all the executed prisoners and they moved them to Pentridge Jail. That was in 1929, and then in 2009 Ned Kelly was dug up again, and they identified that it was him, but I believe his head was missing, and he was laid to rest in Greta Cemetery with his family. So a lot of moving around for Ned in the afterlife. I am here at the Greta Cemetery, the final resting place of Ned Kelly, and his mother Ellen, brothers and sisters and extended family are all here in unmarked graves, which is going to make it a bit challenging, but we'll give it a shot, see if we can figure out where Ned is. It's a freezing cold morning here in Greta, and I've got a bunch of cows staring at me. Hi guys. So let's have a look for the final resting place of Ned Kelly. As you enter the cemetery, there is a headstone here. Here within this cemetery, in unmarked graves, lie Edward Kelly, Mother Ellen, sisters and brothers, Margaret, Grace, James, Daniel and Anne, buried nearby. Nearby, along with their extended family and friends. May they rest in peace. So how are you meant to know where Ned is? Right. I don't know. Now, there is a photo on the internet of somebody standing in front of an area where I suppose Ned is buried. Now, I'll just have a look at that photo. Maybe that might help. But this is the cemetery. It's a beautiful old cemetery. Now, if I look at the photo of the man standing in front of the grave of Ned Kelly, you can see that big headstone there. And so Ned Kelly must be here somewhere. So look at this photo again. Ned Kelly, the remains of Ned Kelly are under here. Nothing to mark it, just birds going crazy. I'm astonished. Someone as famous as Ned Kelly, for all the things he did, whether you think he was a hero or a criminal, this is what he gets. Nothing. But I can't think of a better place for him to be at his final resting place. Greta Cemetery, beautiful place.
Okay.
And now we finish this tour at the site of Ned Kelly's remains, minus his head. Thank you for watching my Ned Kelly location tour. It was fraught with bad weather, microphone issues, and dreaded roadworks getting in my way.
Sorry about the hammering there, but they're very busy over there. Not sure what they're doing, but...
It was still an exciting step back in time for me. And lastly, Ned Kelly. Was he a hero, or was he a villain? I don't want to tell you what to think. I just work here.
New South Wales flies. Okay, this is where Ned had a drink. Powers Lookout. As far as fog goes, it's pretty beautiful.
Such is life.